Welcome back to Midnight Whispers. Don't forget to subscribe, turn off the lights, and let's step into something you can't unhear. I'm telling this exactly the way it happened in the voice I had the night everything changed. Because when I moved into that quiet little cul-de-sac, I never imagined the man living next door would become the one thing I can't explain. And I remember the first time I saw him standing on his porch, with the kind of stillness that made my skin prickle, even though he gave me a polite nod that felt almost rehearsed. And I waved back, thinking nothing of it, until later that night when my doorbell camera alerted me that someone was walking past my house, even though the screen showed only the empty walkway, while my ears clearly caught the distinct crunch of boots across gravel. And I replayed the footage over and over, trying to catch even a blur, before realizing that the only person outside at that time had been my neighbor returning home. And the next morning, when I tried casually mentioning it while picking up my mail, he smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes and said cameras never liked him much, which would have been a joke if his voice hadn't sounded so flat. And I brushed it off until I set up new indoor cameras just for security, and watched as he came over later that day to introduce himself properly with a plate of cookies. Yet in the video, all I saw was my door opening by itself and the cookies floating midair for a moment before settling on the table like an invisible person had set them down. And I felt a wave of panic crawl up my spine, because I had been looking right at him the whole time, while the cameras insisted no one was there. And I tested every angle and every device, constantly trying to catch even a partial image of him. But every single recording showed only the space around him, as if the world refused to acknowledge his existence digitally. And when I asked him casually whether he worked with anything that might affect electronics, he simply said some people just don't register the way others do, in a tone too calm for something so bizarre. And that night, my phone lit up again with movement on my porch, though the live feed showed only my plants swaying gently, even though I could hear a slow, steady breathing coming from the other side of the door, like someone was leaning close, listening to my heartbeat through the wood. And when I opened the door abruptly there, he stood smiling softly, with no explanation for why he had come over so late, except that he wanted to make sure I felt safe in the neighborhood, which somehow made me feel the exact opposite. And as I tried to sleep, I kept replaying the image of him in my mind, compared to the blank footage showing an empty porch where he should have been standing. I spent the next morning convincing myself that maybe my cameras were faulty, or maybe I had installed them wrong, even though I knew deep down something else was happening. Because when I left for work, I saw him outside watering his lawn with a hose that flickered on and off, like the stream only existed when I looked directly at it. And when I glanced away, the sound of rushing water vanished completely only to return the second my eyes returned to him. And later that afternoon, I checked my driveway camera, only to realize it had recorded several minutes of me talking to him as I returned home. Yet the footage showed me gesturing at nothing, as if I were engaged in conversation with thin air, which made my stomach knot painfully. And that night, I invited a friend over, hoping maybe her camera could film him. But when we sat on the porch and he came by to say hello, her phone glitched violently, showing only streaks of distorted light, while she frowned at the screen, insisting something was wrong with the lens, and she left early, clearly unsettled. And I stayed awake, replaying the moments, wondering why his presence seemed to erase itself from anything electronic, while remaining perfectly visible to my eyes. And the next day, I approached him with forced courage, asking if he ever appeared in photographs. And he gave a slow, amused blink before saying he never bothered checking, because people have too much faith in images these days. And his words sounded like they carried a meaning I didn't understand, which made me uneasy enough to start keeping the curtains drawn at night, especially after my indoor camera alerted me to movement in the hallway, even though I knew I was alone. And the footage displayed only the shapes of furniture shifting slightly, as if someone unseen brushed past them. And as days passed, I began noticing that he never made noise when he walked, or opened his door, or came outside, because everything around him moved as if he passed through the world without disturbing it. And whenever I replayed footage from my backyard, where I had seen him standing while talking over the fence, the recording showed only the plants swaying in a pattern that matched his speech rhythm, as though the garden was responding to his voice instead of capturing him. And I tried to avoid him for a while, but he always seemed to know exactly when I stepped outside, appearing a moment later with that same composed expression, asking if everything was all right, which made me feel like my thoughts were louder than my words. One evening, I decided to run a full experiment by setting up multiple cameras around the house, aiming at every angle of my yard and driveway and porch, so that no matter where he stood, he would have to appear on at least one device. And I invited him outside to help me look at a supposed leak in the gutter, because I wanted him in view of all the cameras at once. But when I reviewed the footage later, it was like watching an invisible person rearranging the world around them, with the grass flattening beneath unseen footsteps and the gutter wrench turning by itself, while I stood beside empty air, nodding and talking to someone who did not exist in the video. And the sight of myself interacting with nothing broke something inside me, because it felt like the truth was slipping out from under me, and I wasn't sure whose version of reality was real anymore. And that night, I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open, even though I had locked it before bed. And there he stood in the faint hallway light, looking at me with an expression that didn't seem threatening, but carried a depth I didn't understand. And he whispered that my cameras were making things complicated, and that it would be easier if I stopped trying to watch what wasn't meant to be watched. And although his voice was calm, the meaning of his words chilled me more than anything else, because it implied he knew exactly how hard I had been trying to capture him. And when I reached for my phone on the nightstand to record him, he stepped back instantly, as though the device itself burned him. And the moment I pointed the camera lens toward him, the entire screen froze on static before forcing my phone to restart. And by the time it powered back on, he was gone, leaving no sound, not even the faintest trace that he had ever been in the room. After that, I stopped sleeping well, because every time I closed my eyes, I imagined him standing somewhere in the house, just outside the reach of the cameras, watching me with that unreadable expression. And I began hearing faint knocks at different walls, sometimes soft, sometimes rhythmic, like someone was testing the structure of the house. And each time I checked the cameras, nothing appeared except occasional flickers of light that curved as though bending around a human shape. And one afternoon, I confronted him, unable to take the tension anymore. And I asked straight out why he didn't appear on camera. And he looked at me with an almost gentle sadness, saying some people live between the frames instead of inside them, which made absolutely no sense, but sounded like he believed every word. And I backed away, slowly feeling the dread settle deep in my chest, because his answer wasn't a joke or an excuse. It was an explanation he expected me to accept. And that night, my cameras recorded something even stranger, as the motion sensors kept triggering in the garage, while the footage displayed the tools shifting slightly and the light swinging gently, as if someone was walking through the room unseen. And I knew it was him, because I had heard soft footsteps on the other side of the door, even though the sensors claimed nothing was there. And I whispered to myself that I needed to move out. But every time I tried packing, I felt the sense of being watched intensify, like he knew exactly what I was planning. Eventually, I lost the ability to pretend things were normal because my devices kept malfunctioning. Whenever he came near anywhere within the property, as if he emitted something that didn't allow technology to recognize him. And I considered asking other neighbors if they noticed anything strange. But whenever he was outside, they acted unusually polite around him, like they were trying not to see something they already understood. And one night, my TV flickered on by itself, showing static that slowly smoothed into an image of my living room from the exact angle of a camera I had unplugged hours earlier. But the recording still showed only furniture and not the tall figure I felt standing behind the couch, watching me breathe. And when I turned around, he was there clear as day. And he said softly that I shouldn't rely on devices to tell me what I already know, which made my stomach drop, because it felt like he was telling me only my eyes were allowed to see him. I realized then that he wasn't planning to harm me, but he also wasn't planning to leave me alone, because one morning, when I tried loading my car to move out, he appeared behind me so silently it made me jump. And he said it was a shame I wanted to leave when I had just started to understand the truth, and I didn't know what truth he meant until I checked my cameras one final time and watched hours of footage showing me walking through my house, talking to him, with the recordings capturing every word of my voice, while he was never once visible. And I understood then what he meant, because the way he spoke to me always carried a tone that suggested he didn't live fully in the same world I did. And maybe that was why cameras couldn't see him. And when I drove away, the last thing I saw in my rearview mirror was him standing perfectly still in the driveway, watching me go, even as my rear dash cam showed only the empty pavement behind me. And I knew deep down that even though I left the neighborhood, I didn't leave him, because sometimes at night, my phone alerts me to movement outside, and the footage shows nothing at all, even though I hear footsteps pacing slowly across my porch, as if he followed me here and is waiting for me to open the door.